I really believe that you have to have that positive like attitude, and there will be knockbacks and there will be what people say, oh, it's a failure, but actually there's no such thing as failures. You know, it's all about reframing it. It's like, okay, this didn't work out the way I wanted to, but what did I learn from it? What can I use from that experience to build onto my next, like, whatever project you're doing? You know, there's always something positive you can take away from what you might see. It might seem at that moment negative for you, and that I think is really key to have that kind of attitude if you want to do this kind of work.
Rachel, hello, welcome.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Rachel, so where are you and what do you do?
So right now I am in the southern part of Sweden, an hour and a half north of Copenhagen, in a little village on the seaside. I look out the window. It is raining. I can see the sea. I can see Denmark. So that's where I am right now. And what do? I am somebody who gets creative with food. So I work with food, whether it is creating recipes for different mediums, books, magazines, newspapers, websites, social media, TV shows. So I work in different kind of mediums, and then consulting, events. That's why I say I kind of like I'm creative with food. So I can't put myself just into one whole like category, which a lot of people would say I'm a food writer, broadcaster, add a few other things on it.
Yeah, your Instagram leads me to believe that you spend a lot of time mixing things together because every time I see your Instagram, it's something that I'm more or less unfamiliar with, but looks incredible. Um, what's your culinary background?
So I trained in Paris. I went to culinary school in Paris, but before that, I went to art college in London. So I actually have a degree in media, so like specializing in graphic design, photography, web design, um, and like so media based arts. And then I kind of graduated, did like PR, marketing, and fashion. Had enough of that. Moved to Paris, studied at culinary school, specializing in patisserie in Paris. And then after that, I kind of got into like the food like styling. So food styling, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's basically where you work with like a photographer, or you're working with a videographer, and you make food look beautiful. So you make it look like, you know, nowadays people are so used to food looking beautiful, but it's quite a skill, certainly if you're working with moving image, like if you're doing commercials and stuff like that, people can spend hours just tweaking a piece of parsley. So that's why I ended up, and then I ended up doing cookbooks, events, and kind of what I do now. Yeah, so I've been doing that for the last over a decade now. So yeah, it's become more and more obviously social media based in the last, like, I'd say 5 years or so. It's very heavily focused on social media.
And how did you get into the presenter side of it? Was it just winning personality, or was that a goal that you had?
So when I moved to Paris, I didn't really speak French. I didn't know anybody. I worked as an au pair and a cook for a French family, as well as like studying at culinary school. And so eventually, through various different jobs, I managed to start working on other people's cookbooks as a recipe tester. And through that, I got a book deal with a French publisher, actually a two cookbook deal. And after I'd written those two cookbooks, I was like, oh, I don't want to work with the French anymore. A little tip. Oh, I don't know if you've got a lot of French followers out there, but I found
I
it
don't either.
particularly difficult with working with the French, but it might be kind of a cultural misunderstanding or lost in translation. So I really wanted to write a cookbook in English for the English market. And I felt I had a story to tell. So for me, writing cookbooks isn't just about writing a recipe and like, oh, you put 10 grams of this and a cup of flour, blah blah blah. It's more about telling a story through the recipe. So I wanted to write the story of how it's, my journey of like moving to Paris and what it was like to discover French food and cook in a very small kitchen, because my kitchen was, or my bed sit, my studio apartment was like literally 21 square meters. Don't ask me what that's in foot, but
Relatively
it's a
small.
it's small. Like the kitchen was literally, I could like stretch my arms out, and I'm like 5'4". So
Okay.
it's like, pretty small. So I wrote this cookbook about my small kitchen in Paris and cooking French food as a Brit. And I also hosted pop-up like lunches in my small apartment, like a table for two. So I could test out recipes from the cookbook on these like guests. And so I thought this would be make a good it'd make a good TV show. So I basically said to my literary agent, look, could you help me get me some meetings with some TV production companies in London? So I set up some meetings, and this is like a bit like dating. So you've got to meet up the production companies, and you're like, this is my idea, this is me, what do you think of me? Would we make a good match? And many times I got like a no. Oh, you're XYZ, you don't fit this, you haven't got any TV experience, blah blah blah. But I found a small indie production company who loved my idea and also were really open to me being creatively involved, because that's very important to me, not just being like the face in front of the camera, but being kind of involved in like the full process. So we put a little kind of taster reel together and we pitched it to networks in the UK, and the BBC picked up the show. It was a 6 part, and it was aired in 2012 on BBC Two, and then went to continue to air around the world on various different channels. And that's what got me into TV. And since then, I've been doing TV regularly. Still can't believe it. I'm still doing TV. I mean, it's it's a bit of an outdated format, though. So yeah, so that's what got me onto TV. But nowadays, what I love about the landscape now is you can really start from nothing and build something yourself, which I kind of like. I started blogging in 2006 on Blogspot. I don't know. Anyway, does that still exist? Not sure. I don't know.
I'm familiar with it, but I'm also pretty old. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
me too. I'm old. I'm like, I was on MySpace.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So no, so I started blogging, and I used to like blog with a lot of food bloggers. We'd do like online cook-offs and competitions, and where you would vote for each other's like favorite dish. This was pre-Instagram, and through that's how I kind of got like my pop-up. So I was doing pop-up dinners and stuff like that, my word out about my pop-up events. And then Facebook came along, and that kind of helped with like promoting my events. But I really kind of love how you can start with nothing. Like you just have to, it's just your time and energy. Obviously that is a cost, but you can take that and literally make something, make a career out of it. Obviously it takes talent and it takes persistence. Nothing's easy. But there is that opportunity. Whereas like 20 years ago, if you wanted to be on TV or if you wanted to get your message out there, you had to approach like the gatekeepers, which were the TV commissioners, which were the publishing houses, and you didn't have that opportunity. Where it's a lot more open nowadays, that nobody is gatekeeping in that sense.
Yeah, that's your career path is something that probably sounds a lot more familiar to people these days with hustle culture and this universal entrepreneurial spirit that people have utilizing social media to build their businesses. But you were out there, you were like a pioneer of that unconventional career path to a certain degree. Um, you strike me as like a positive, energetic person. Was that necessary for you back in those days, or were you just always so passionate that you were never daunted?
Oh my goodness, you have to be persistent. I mean, like imagine those little dogs, they look really fluffy and friendly, but when they bite your leg, they just don't let go. So a friend of mine, she gave me a postcard with a little dog on it. It said, like, you're like those little dogs. When I have an idea in my head, I kind of really grab on it and I don't let go. And I don't take no for an answer. And I really believe, it might be not be the straight way you might think it's supposed to go, but you will find a way to whatever you visualize in your head. You will find a way to get there, but it does require hard work. You can never take the hard work out of the equation. Nothing is given nowadays. People might look at your social media, think, oh, look, it's so easy. Da, 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 da. You're just like doing da, da, da. People have no clue. Like when I film my like Instagram videos, you don't see the outtakes of me like obviously testing the recipe, like getting all the ingredients, then filming it, then like having a mad like fight with the camera stand and like the light going or whatever, da, 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 and then you got to edit it all. Then you got it like that. The hard work is not really seen. It's like, so I really believe that you have to have that positive like attitude, and there will be knockbacks and there will be what people say, oh, it's a failure, but actually there's no such thing as failures. It's all about reframing it. It's like, okay, this didn't work out the way I wanted to, but what did I learn from it? What can I use from that experience to build onto my next like whatever project you're doing? There's always something positive you can take away from what you might see. It might seem at that moment negative for you, and that I think is really key to have that kind of attitude if you want to do this kind of work, because there are so many knockbacks. I mean, obviously people assume that I'm super successful. I am still out there like knocking on those doors. I've been writing a pitch for a book for like 5 years now, and I've almost finished it. But do you know how much 5 years work has gone into it? Like to get it at the point my agent says, oh, I think you're almost there, but it's still, that's the way it is. So yeah, it's having that willingness to take a risk and then putting the hard work into it, I think is essential.
Yeah, and a part that I don't hear a lot of people talk about is also you you have to be confident in your abilities, and you have to have put in a lot of back work a long time before you ever get to the point where you're like, I'm gonna go be a star and I'm gonna never give up. A long time before that, you have to have developed something inside of yourself that you can fall back on, because when those setbacks do come, there are going to be a lot of times when you're totally by yourself, when you've lost everything, and what you've got left, well, you've got whatever's in the piggy bank of life experience, and that's what carries you forward. And your educational background was storied, and it gave you lots of different perspectives, and you trained. I can't recite the word that you said, but I think you studied pastry in French
Yes. Yeah,
cooking
I always
school.
say patisserie, the French word.
Patisserie. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm from South Carolina in the United States, so I've got to keep the vocabulary
Okay.
a little
All
bit
right.
lower.
I will say pastry.
Okay, yeah, but one presumes that's a fairly rigorous and something that one takes pride in to have studied that in France, and those things are what you present through this long process of development and creativity and polishing. And that's the part that, when you're at those levels, particularly these days where so much of this experience that we have is the outward side of it through social media, I think that a lot of the younger people that I interact with on Instagram, a lot of them, I think, get lost in this idea of, if I just get that final presentation down, if I just get that aesthetic, that style, that those technological tools, that's what I'm going for, and that's really not the goal. The goal is the thing that you keeps you awake at night and that drives your passions.
Yes, I do believe the goal, but I think the older I become, this is when I sound like an old person, which I am really, is also try and enjoy the process because there's always going to be another goal. There's always going to be, so enjoy the making of the experience. So it'll be so much more rewarding because if you're constantly chasing that goal, you're that's it's never going to end. So, life is about, the experience and enjoy the process of making it. And then you'll get more out of it. It'll be more rewarding. And I would say if you're someone who is creating a lot of content, what I've realized is the more stuff you're putting out, the more stuff you actually need to put in, that you need to nourish yourself. So there is this writer, this American writer, Julia Cameron, and she wrote The Writer's Way. Am I getting this right? Anyway, her work is very interesting in terms of not only if you're into, writing, but also in terms of the artist's way. That's it, the artist's way. So about how, for instance, you should take yourself on a date every week to like explore something which would nourish you. It could be a cultural thing, but it could also be like, I don't know, meeting somebody who for you is like a mentor or who nourishes you in one way. Or I've realized that I actually need to spend more time offline in the real world. So that inspires me more and pushes my work more. Or like taking the time to actually meditate, work out, look after myself gives me more energy. Whereas like 10 years ago, I say, oh, I don't have the time. I've got so much work. I can't do this. I can't fit in half an hour. But actually, when you look after yourself and put in some time into you, you work better. So that is something which has only clicked in the like last 5 years, that taking time out of your heavy workload for yourself gives back more than not taking it.
Yeah, the real world part of it is interesting, even in the sort of day to day mundane aspect where you don't really pay attention that something's happening to you because what creativity is, it's your internal process of transforming the input you've received and turning it into something meaningful. And that's something that can be meaningful to you, but with time and skill and a lot of hard work, it can be things that are meaningful to other people, and that's what professional creatives are aspiring to. But you don't know where it's going to come from, and you've got to go out and sort of like be the little sponge in the world and have these real experiences, so you've got something to process and reflect on. And unfortunately, that's you got to take in good and bad in that. But hopefully, with the right upbeat attitudes, take you can take varied life experiences, and the meaning that comes from them can be useful to all sorts of people. And I'm really curious to know one of the questions that I receive very often is how do I know how do I know what I'm looking for? How do I know it's my thing? Because you think somebody who's in like their early 20s,
Mm.
they've got input of all over the place, and they're also I feel like a lot of people sort of are wrestling with, well, I enjoy this, or I'm exposed to this, or everybody else is doing this, but none of those things actually mean like, here's where my passion lies. So for you, how did you know when you found your thing?
Well, I had a very strong gut feeling. I've always been creative, and I just found food was an excellent way to be creative. And that was what I use as food is the way I communicate, meet people, connect with people. So that was just natural. It felt natural to me to kind of use food as a way of working. And I love how I get to travel, I get to be creative, I get to do all sorts of projects from books to filming to recipe creating to events, you name it. So food is a fantastic kind of vehicle for that. But I would say um, I had to do a lot of like boring and mediocre jobs before I ended up this. Like I worked at Burger King, I've worked supermarkets stacking shelves, I've waitressed, I've done all these things. So sometimes, and I think this is something which is quite hard to accept as a young person. You might just have to do a boring job, a 9 to 5, which is dull as dishwater, because you have to pay the bills. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. There should be no kind of guilt or shame in that. And you can do your creative stuff on the side. And actually, there might be something really refreshing about clocking in at 9, clocking out at 5, and then you don't have to think about that job. You have the freedom to do anything in your free time, because being a freelancer entrepreneur is all it eats you up. You don't have a life at the beginning. I had no life in my 20s in that sense. I have very little money. I didn't have the freedom. So there are benefits from being employed and doing something creative on the side and just enjoying that creativity because you can, and you don't have the pressure of getting XYZ amount of engagement or whatever results you need. You just enjoy that creativity. So I would say, um, don't feel like you have to do something all inspiring as a career. That isn't it is not for everyone, you have to find out what's right for you. And the great thing about nowadays is you can try things out. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Do something else. As long as you're healthy, you're safe, you can pay your bills, then that's all right. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with trying things out. And if it doesn't work out, at least you've tried it. That's what I tell my kids when I cook them dishes. They're like, "Oh, mom, I don't want to eat that." I say, just try. That happens a lot at my home. So yeah, just try. You have to try everything once, and that's okay if you don't want to eat it afterwards. But as long as you try it, that's okay with me.
Yeah, and it's also I think that on the subject of uh, taking the taking the jobs that are practical, we'll put it like that. There's also something valuable. Sometimes in life, you find what you're looking for when you stop searching for it, and you've got to sort of clear out and make space for magic to find a place to come into your life. I know for myself when I went in sort of a corporate direction with graphic design, and I had a job in a small place in South Carolina, but it was a really good design job that there was a lot of competition for, and I had been there for less than a year, and my soul was dying, and I hated every second of it. It was a professional creative with no creativity, and one day I said, "This isn't the life that I want, and I don't know where to go. I don't know what the direction is." And so I went home. I sold my TV to my parents, and I got rid of all video games. I got rid of everything that previously I thought was relieving my stress from my bad job. And every day I went home, I started reading. I just sat down in a chair by a lamp and I read every single day whenever I got home from work, or I'd go to I was near a university campus with a big green space. So I'd go put out a blanket and lay under a tree and read. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was like the embryo of the career as a writer, because I was building inside of myself this desire to create the thing that I was taking in, and I wouldn't have made that decision if I had, I think, been in the hustle culture and been producing for social media. And but that was my path, and everybody's got their own way. um I am curious though, you talk about your kids. How old are your kids?
7, 5, and 1.5.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a good range of picky eater ages. Um,
Yeah, it's the least pickiest is the 1.5 year old. So
naturally.
yeah, no, but it's okay. You know what? Like things, I always think as long as they try it, that's fine with me. You know, if it's not for them, that's okay. It's like anything in life. You have to give something a go to know you don't like it.
Well, I'm curious because a lot of the food that I see you cooking, and I don't know very much about food, so forgive me if my ignorance is showing. But um, it seems like a lot of the food that you cook is you're touching on things that are traditional in Swedish culinary, like ingredients or dishes in Swedish food. And I have been to Sweden. It's one of the few foreign countries that I have been to, and it was it was a little bit of it. I wouldn't say it was an exotic experience with food, but it was very unfamiliar. You know, it was simple food, but I didn't know what anything was. I didn't understand anything. And so, do your kids get like a mixed cultural food experience in your house, or I mean, I assume you're experimenting all the time. So,
Well, look, they obviously go to Swedish school. So in Sweden, if anybody's been to IKEA, you know the meatballs. That's like you have meatballs every week. It's like a classic. So yeah, it's Swedish food is very much based in like Sweden's background. It's like a farming background, so it's very hearty. This is a cold country. We are very far up north. It snowed yesterday, and we're April. You know, this is
mm,
like um, so it is cold. So it's very hearty, very comfort, very simple, a lot of root vegetables, potatoes in every form, cabbage, and fish. So, and then a lot of game, but it's simple food. So it's nothing complicated. It's not very spicy unless you like the cinnamon buns and the cardamom buns, which you find at every bakery here or every petrol station. So my kids have a very kind of Swedish kind of food at school. They have a cooked meal at school, and it's very kind of like what they called husmanskost, which is like home cooked food. And then at home, I try and mix it up. It really depends. Like what I'm cooking. I like yesterday was spaghetti bolognese. To On Monday I did like a chicken soup, but like I to make sure everybody likes it, like a homemade chicken soup. It's like very simple, but then threw in a few Asian garnishes, like with some chilies and soy sauce and like the crunchy veg on the side, and like egg noodles. So I kind of try and make the food accessible to everyone, but with the idea that as parents, you want to enjoy it too. I don't want to eat, I mean, I don't mind fish fingers. Occasionally, fish fingers is great, right? And my kids, like, they love chicken nuggets, but I'm not eating chicken nuggets every day, you know? So, I do like to keep it open. Like my background is I grew up in the UK, but my mum is from Austria. Austria, the little country in the middle of Europe where, they have amazing chocolate, and they do like strudel and sachertorte and schnitzel. So that's also kind of comfort food. And then my dad is from Malaysia. So Malaysia, it's like curries, but you also have like stir fries, a lot of Chinese influence. So it's like very mixed. And then, throw in some British. I'm drinking a cup of tea right now. So it's very mixed kind of upbringing. So I kind of bring that into my cooking, but with the idea, I want to make cooking accessible. I understand everybody's busy at home. Everybody's got loads to do. You've got like you sometimes at the weekend you have time to cook to entertain, but in general, you just want something nourishing, tasty that everyone will enjoy. So with the recipes I create, so a year ago I set up like this membership subscription for people who want to get like my recipes, and every month they kind of get a menu, a starter, main, and dessert, and I make it seasonal to like the northern hemisphere because I have a lot of followers from Australia, so it works with the northern hemisphere. So we're going into spring, the season. So I like cook home cooked food, which is accessible, approachable, but also finding the joy. Food should be fun. I don't want to take it too seriously. If it doesn't work out at home, that's okay. We can solve it. We can find a way to solve it. So I really try and make it accessible. And just like, yeah, don't take it too serious. Like people take food too seriously sometimes. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting medium for creativity because everybody is consuming food, presumably, and not everybody's got a block of marble laying around that they've got to
I
deal
know.
with every day, but everybody does consume food, and while we all go through a certain period in our early 20s where that consumption is not always what we want, and it's a lot of instant noodles and that sort of thing, there there does get to a point where everybody wants variety, everybody wants comfort from their food, nutrition, health. Um, there's and occasionally indulgence, and so those are primal. They're primitive feelings that we have about our food, and it's every single day. Particularly as a mom, you're gonna churn something out, but at the same time, you've got all these influences from your childhood. You've got influences from your education, from your professional development, from your creativity, your aspirations for the future, and it's channeled into something for you that has a lot of meaning, whereas the rest of us may struggle to see that meaning in that daily meal that we prepare, and that's there's a certain degree of subtle profundity in that, I think, as a creative medium, and you clearly love it and you clearly think about it all the time, so I'm sure it's I'm I'm sure it remains a thrilling experience for you on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I mean, I don't think I ever will get bored of food. What I think drew me to food originally was the fact it is a great way to connect to people from doesn't matter, even if you don't speak their language, you can connect through food. It's such a great way to meet people, to connect. When I like moved, as a foreigner, I moved to France. I didn't speak French, but I could with sign language try and explain to the butcher, oh, I want to cook a boeuf bourguignon and blah, 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 with my awful French at the beginning. And we'd have a lovely, hands, gesture chat. Moving to Sweden, it was also, I mean, the Swedes speak very good English, but when I moved to Stockholm originally, it was a fantastic way to like meet people, say, oh, do you fancy grabbing fika? And fika is the Swedish tradition of having a coffee and a bun. So
Hmm.
they don't just, oh, let's go for coffee. They say, we go for coffee and a bun. So
Gotcha.
that's a good tradition.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so it's a wonderful way to connect with people. And like you said, it's basic. Like everybody needs to eat. I always say when I meet people, like, you don't have to cook. I don't care if you cook or not, but if you don't like to eat,
Hmm.
then we're gonna have a hard
Right, right, right. Yeah.
time.
Yeah, where I'm from, there's a traditional barbecue culture that's unique to my little area. If you go through the Southeast U.S., pork barbecue and beef in the more of the western areas, but every little sort of pocket, because these things developed when there wasn't a lot of travel and communication, and so flavors of sauces, cooking techniques, and that sort of thing, it's always a little bit different. And of course, anywhere you go, there's a great degree of elitism, and everybody looks down on everybody else's approach, particularly in those border areas. And when I was growing up, my grandfather, we do a whole hog barbecue in the southeast, and so that's a pig that's somewhere between 85 and 125 pounds, that's been butterflied. His brain, his head has been he's it's gone, and so you've got a butterfly pig, and you cook it. You have a burn barrel. You're cooking burning wood, shoveling coals underneath them, and you cook him for like 8 hours or something like that. And It's laborious and it's very time consuming, and so it becomes a communal event just by nature of what it is. And looking back on it, not very many people do this anymore, or if they do it, they cook it with propane or something that's way easier to deal with. And so I look back on that as a kid and realized that there was something really great that I've been missing because um, typically, like in the culture, typically men would get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, start the burn barrel, get the pig ready to go, put it out on the barbecue pit, and they're shoveling the coals. They're doing all the little things, while usually as the family has gathered, the ladies are inside, they're preparing side dishes and that sort of thing. And I remember being a boy and I wasn't getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I'd get up and I'd go out there with the men. And, of course, there's a couple of beer cans laying around by that point. And um, there, there's this bonding that never occurred anywhere else in my life. There was an exposure to that aspect of my male relatives that I didn't see anywhere else in life. And then eventually the pig gets cooked. You go in, you process it with everybody. Everybody comes in. They kind of have like a big metal tray of the meat and there, all that stuff. And um, and my family would do that twice a year at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And it's it's amazing because everybody looked forward to it. Especially me being a boy, like the food for me was just, I couldn't wait. I'd be sitting there salivating. I think they wouldn't even let me like actually process the meat because I'd just sit there eating it by the fistfuls. And as you're standing around the pig while it's cooking, you're popping little pieces off of it here and there. And um, that's it's something that's just, it doesn't come from anywhere else in life. That it wouldn't have happened. Like sitting around and opening the presents at Christmas, while that's wonderful, um, that's not the core of the family experience. But gathering around for that communal meal that everybody's got to put effort into, and that everybody's got to take time for, and everybody's got to prepare for, that's core to that family experience, and you just can't get it anywhere else. And it's a wonderful thing. And I think that particularly younger people who are younger couples or newer families, I really think that people should put in the effort to start those things and get together with their friends and their families and try to crank those little traditions up and have those communal events because it's really important to us. I think it's important to us in a way that we don't see on the surface of it.
I I don't know if you heard of Priya Parker. She's an American, I don't know what I would call her. Anyway, really interesting. She did a TED talk many years ago, and she's written a book about gatherings and how you can enhance your gathering and how you can bring more meaning to it. And I think, okay, obviously good food is helps, but actually the human connection can make it even more special. And I think the emphasis should be about bringing people together rather than thinking, oh, you have to create some elaborate feast or whatever. It can be super simple. It could be just like a couple pieces of nice cheese and some grapes and some crackers. You can make it so simple, but taking the time to bring a certain group of friends who would find that connection meaningful is a wonderful thing. So I always tell people when they're like, "Oh, entertaining, it's so daunting. I don't want to," you don't have to make it daunting. You can make the food or get everybody to bring something along, make it a potluck. So, I always say it's about bringing people together rather than focus on the food. Obviously, I'm selling myself out of a job here, but I do think, the fact you bring people together has much more meaning than the dishes you're making. Like anybody will say, when you go to a restaurant and you have amazing food, but the service is horrendous, you're definitely not going to go back. But if you go somewhere where the food, it's fine, but the service was exceptional and they made you feel like extra special, you're more likely to go back to that restaurant, aren't you? So I think that human connection is essential with anything, with anything.
Well, I'll sell you back into a job here. So everybody listening, when you start your potluck traditions, here's what you should do. Everybody gets a copy of Rachel's cookbooks, and the potlucks are all from her recipes. There you go. There you go.
There you go. Or you can find lots of inspiration on my website, and a lot of the recipes have like little videos. So if you're like really not sure about how you should make it, you can watch the little video and stuff like that. That's very helpful.
Well,
So yeah.
well, this is also a good segue. Rachel, I want you to tell me what you consider to be your greatest success in life.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't think I have one single one. And I think the greatest success I have is my have I can't speak English now. Having the tenacity and the persistence to not give up. That has been my greatest success. And I continue to do that because I could easily just get a 9 to 5. Well, I don't know if I could get a 9 to 5. Who would hire me? Like, I'm not sure. I haven't written my CV in years. They'll look at my
I know
CV
the
like,
feeling.
like social media content creator. I don't know if I want to work with her. So I think that is my greatest success because, for instance, about what was it? Let me think. Yeah, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I set up like a online lifestyle magazine community. And I thought, this is the big thing. This is my dream. I want to create like a younger, cooler, more accessible version of Goop. Let's put it like that. And I pumped in loads of money. I bought a studio. I renovated a studio. I had a team of 5 people working for me. I was hustling nonstop with a newborn. If it did not succeed, I had to close it down. Even though I should have closed it a lot sooner than I just let it draw out because I just had too much like belief in it. But I would say, even though it was so painful at the time to like let go of that dream and realize this is not working out, I learned so much from that experience that has influenced my work today. I know that I don't want a team of people. And I don't want to be working with like I only like work with a handful of freelancers dependent on a project if I need them. Otherwise, I'm pretty much working on my own. All the content you see on my social media, I film it myself unless it's like for a special campaign or it's a TV show. So even though that business did not succeed financially and I had to close it, that experience, that tenacity, and that persistence to say, okay, it did not work out, but I will continue with my creative work and I will find different avenues to be creative and to work. That has been my biggest success and the one I continue to rely on today.
So, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to do in your life?
I think one of the hardest things is to like move countries. So I moved as a kid, I moved to the UK and to Germany. So I have some experience of living in different countries, but in my mid 20s, when I was working in fashion PR marketing, I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to quit that and move to Paris and like work as an au pair and study like pastry and go to culinary school. So moving to Paris, not knowing anybody, not having the financial security, I'd saved up a little money for the tuition fees. That was pretty daunting. And I think what was also daunting after I graduated, I decided to stay longer because I felt, oh, maybe I could improve my French. But I had some miserable years of like, working as a perfume sales assistant and teaching English and just trying to cobble together enough money to pay my rent. But also I had a side hustle of trying to make it as like food in the food styling, food publishing world. So that was really, really tough. Um, yeah, so I think for me it was like going into a situation and giving up the comfort of like a 9 to 5 paid really, good pay, like a cool job in fashion, PR marketing. Everybody thinks it's like a bit, Devil Wears Prada. No, no Miranda Presley, but it was actually, hang on a moment. I did have a director who was from New York who had that vibe a little bit, but she was awesome, like pretty cool. I mean, like I still think about her energy and her like kind of goal, the way she looked at something and knew the direction she wanted to go. That was very inspiring. Certainly as a woman, I think things have changed, definitely changed. Certainly in the culinary world, a little bit, maybe a little bit in the TV world. It could
Well,
improve.
if the TV world wants to remain in the world, it needs to change some because that's a small and smaller piece of people's attention these days. Um, so I've enjoyed hearing your story, Rachel, because to me, what I hear is a story of knowing. It's a story of analyzing success and failure, and when anybody who's doing their own thing, anybody who's got that spark of passion, they're going to go through an experience of failing a whole bunch at stuff. And one of the hard parts is knowing like what's the good failure and the bad failure. So for example, with your business that you ended up having to let go of, there's going to be moments in that where you're like, okay, this sucks, like this hasn't worked for the 20th time, but you know that success comes after that. You know that you can't see what the magic thing is going to be, and you constantly have to mitigate that stress and that worry and that those all those self-esteem issues and all that sort of thing. You're constantly mitigating that because you're telling yourself like, no, this isn't the moment. When's the moment? And you have to, unfortunately, with a lot of things, we have to like just decide when that moment is for ourselves. But opposed to that, you had an experience that you just described in being a young patissier. All right.
Trivia?
Yeah,
Trivia?
yeah, and in France and all the challenges that you described with that, and I'm sure there were a lot of nights where you're sort of like in your studio apartment, like curled up in the fetal position, not knowing if you've ruined your life or done the right thing or what's going to happen tomorrow. But you had to mitigate that stress. You had to ask those hard questions of yourself, and choosing the path of your passion, it was the right turn to make. And so you've had such a you've had a life filled with all of these sorts of charging out boldly in these directions, and here you are. I think that I would call you a successful person. You certainly have developed your own style, you've developed your own voice. There are a lot of people who are paying attention to you, and you probably have a lot of impact on the way they see food and the entertainment they get from trying new things and expanding their horizons. So I hope that people can look at that story and think about their own catalog of failures and decide for themselves, which turn to take. That's what I think is the payoff from hearing that story today. And
Thank you.
you're welcome, Rachel. How do you want people to get a hold of you on the World Wide Web?
Well, it's really easy. You can find me on my website, old-fashioned website. Do you know what that
Yeah,
is?
you gotta type into the keyboard to get to that.
So obviously, I'm building a community. I don't know, certainly in the UK, because I'm from the UK and a lot of work comes from the UK for me. There's a platform called Substack, which is gaining a lot of traction. But I've kind of created my own community on my website, which is like a weekly, it's like a version of Substack, but it's all like based out on my website, which is just my name, Rachel Khoo, KHOO.com. So yeah, you can find it all on my website. Then you can get links to Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. But I'm kind of moving away a little bit from the social. You don't, if you want kind of, you want to have the real Rachel Khoo, you'll get it more by subscribing to my newsletter, which you can do that on my website. Instagram, you're just gonna get like the leftovers. I put the leftovers.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. Some people, a
Or
lot
the
of work goes into
sides.
making
The
this happen.
sides.
Yeah,
Yeah, the sides. I mean, like I what I love about it's a very small community on my website, my newsletter community, but it's like, I get you reply to the email, I reply back. You've got direct there's no algorithm or whatever you're trying to fight. It's like straight into your inbox, from me, from my little desk looking out onto the Denmark and the sea to you wherever you are in the world.
yeah. Well, as we've sort of touched back on multiple times in our conversation, the real value of the experience is the human experience inside of whatever you're doing, and I do think there's a bit of a shift these days in that ocean of social media where we're all the sort of anonymous pawns of algorithms, and we're being shown what someone else has determined is the thing that's going to make them money. That there is a lot of value in being able to get together and interact with real people, especially over something as universally pleasurable as food and food culture. So I hope that everybody will get in there and get insight and learn all the things that I enjoy seeing about Swedish food and ingredients that I don't really understand, but all looks delicious.
It's
Uh,
not Swedish food. I'd say I've got a more of a global perspective. So don't worry. There's no Swedish chef from the Muppets.
Certainly. Well, I forgive me for stereotyping you. I'm really so enamored by what I see because I watch all your reels and stuff like that. So
Thank you.
it's I thoroughly enjoy learning about all these things myself. So well, Rachel, thank you so much for the time that you've given me today and for providing insight and telling your story. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to enjoy listening to it. And if you're out there listening and you're in Denmark, step outside your door and wave towards Rachel. She's looking at you right now.
Or the south, yeah, yeah. I was like, it's a rainy day, so I don't know. You have to be wearing a very red or yellow, brightly coloured coat today, or you could swim across. So yeah, but no, thank you so much. It was great chatting. It's
Yeah, it was.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, I loved it. And so to everybody who's listening, go and check out at once you're if you're in Denmark when you're done jumping up and down in your raincoat waving, go check out Rachel's site and just show some love. And thank you, Rachel, and thank you to everybody who listened today. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.